Hello and welcome to today's Industry Solutions webinar. My name is Lisa Stewart and I'm the Marketing and Communications Coordinator at 12D Solutions. Our Industry Solutions webinars are designed to provide insights into overcoming challenges in an evolving industry in more effective and efficient ways. We'll keep running these webinars regularly and recording them for posting on our YouTube channel with links through our website. Our previous webinars from this Industry Solutions series, as well as those from our training series, are available online if you missed those. During this presentation, you'll be able to type your questions along the way, as shown on the screen, and we'll answer as many as possible throughout the webinar. At the end, I'll forward your questions to the presenter for his insights. Today's webinar, Making Great Workflows, will be presented by Michael Behar, who is a Regional Sales Manager at Extra Dimension Solutions and is responsible for 12D Synergy sales, training and implementation. Michael will take us through three key components of great workflows and a customer case study, Work as Constructed Plan. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Lisa. And hello, everyone. My name's Michael Behar, and I'm with Extra Dimension Solutions. Today I'll first cover three components of great workflows, and then we'll take a look at an actual customer case study with a work as constructed workflow. At the end, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. While I'll be covering three components of great workflows today, I'd like to first touch on all of the components required to make great workflows. To make great workflows, first you'll want to map the current process. Then, depending on your process change objectives, you'll want to analyze the process and identify related problems and the root causes. You need to design the solution, solicit buy-in for process change, and then test the change, implement it, and measure the results. Today's presentation is focused on the first three components. Let's talk about mapping the current process. So why should we map a process? Well, mapping a process can help improve communication as well as understanding of the process itself, and it can provide context regarding where a particular process fits within the organization as a whole. If you plan to improve, measure, or monitor a process, mapping it first is a good idea. And mapping a process can be part of an ISO 9001 or other quality management initiative, or the implementation of a 12D Synergy workflow. Mapping a process with a swim lane diagram like this one can be very useful for visualizing serial workflows. In knowledge work-based industries like architecture, engineering, and construction, workflows tend to be serial in nature. They tend to flow from one activity or state to another in a linear fashion. One example might be a review and approval process. Note that all workflows have a trigger at the beginning and produce an output for the customer at the end. Placing a swim lane for the customer at the top helps everyone focus on how each state relates back to the customer. And keep in mind that activities that turn resources into customer value are value creating. On the other hand, activities that use resources for some other purpose are non-value creating or waste. A swim lane diagram makes it easy to visualize where handoffs occur in a workflow. Handoffs are important because a workflow state is either waiting, being worked on, or being moved. The value creation part of a workflow state is by definition when it's being worked on, not when it's waiting or being moved. Our next component is determine process change objectives. Once you've mapped the current process, you need to determine your process change objectives for the workflow. One objective might be to increase customer satisfaction, but most customers demand faster turnaround times, reduce costs, better productivity, and improved quality. In general, there may be trade-offs depending on how process change objectives are prioritized. For example, you may need to increase costs to shorten lead times. On the other hand, these objectives are not always mutually exclusive. For example, improving quality might also reduce costs and shorten lead times. Whatever your objectives, it's important to make sure they're in alignment with customer needs. Some ways to achieve your objectives might be to reduce cycle times, reduce waiting times, reduce the total number of states, and also through implementing new quality measures, or through identifying ways to reduce rework. Next, we need to analyze the process, define any problems, and understand the root cause of those problems. So, we've mapped the current process and determined our objectives. Now it's time to analyze the process. We can start by asking a few questions. Who is the customer? While this seems straightforward, it's not always the case. Is it the end customer, an internal customer, or possibly another stakeholder? We also need to know what triggers the workflow to begin. Is it a request from the customer, the completion of some piece of work, or something else? What is the output that the customer receives at the end? Knowing the required output can help us clarify who the actual customer is. We also need to know what inputs are required and outputs are produced for each state, and what the customer values about those outputs. We need to understand what really occurs before, during, and after each state. Does each workflow state reflect the reality of what happens? Some other things that would be useful to understand would be, what's the total lead time for this process? What's the total value creating time and total waste time? And at a more detailed level, what is the value creating time and waste time for each state? How do we measure quality for each state? Do we use percent complete and accurate or some other quality measure? Are there any states that can be eliminated? Eliminating the number of states can greatly improve lead times and reduce complexity. Which states include rework? In this example, we have potential rework in state 3. Lastly, how can we reduce waiting and queue times to speed this process up? But before we begin making changes to the workflow, it's important to make sure we're solving the right problem and not just the symptoms of a deeper problem. How many times do we hear, the problem is one thing, only to later discover that the real problem is actually something else? Root cause analysis can be a useful tool in avoiding this kind of scenario. With root cause analysis, the problem is described in a problem statement as it is currently understood. We then ask a series of why questions with answers until we get to the bottom of the problem. Some people call this 5 whys analysis. For example, we might start with the question, why do we have an increase in customer complaints? And through a series of several questions and answers, drilling down on the problem, we come up with the suspected root cause being that there are too many steps for checking drawings, which causes delays in delivering drawings to customers. Now let's take a look at a customer case study. This is an actual customer's workflow for producing work as constructed plans. First, the field markup is completed by the PM. Then the work as constructed is drafted by a draftsperson. The PM reviews the work as constructed, and if the markup is okay, then the draft is checked by John. Otherwise, it's reworked. The PM then reviews the drafting markup again after it's checked by John. The draftsperson makes changes. The PM reviews it again, and if the work as constructed is okay, then the design development checklist is completed by the project manager. Otherwise, the work as constructed is reworked. The designer then reviews the work as constructed, and if it's okay, the design development checklist is completed by the designer. Otherwise, it's amended by the draftsperson. Assuming that it is okay, the design development checklist is then signed off by the project manager, and passed to the PM's admin team for project completion package lodgement. And the workflow ends. Now let's take a look at the same workflow in a swim lane diagram and do a bit of analysis. Who is the customer? We determined that the customer is actually the project manager, an internal customer. The project manager triggers this workflow and participates in 6 states in total. Basically, the project manager is working in the capacity of an expediter, chasing everyone to get the project completion package done. What triggers this workflow? Well, first the work is completed on site, then all the pits and depths are surveyed, and then the project manager completes the field markup. We might consider any of these activities to be the trigger for this workflow, but we ultimately decided that the receipt of the work as constructed survey data should be a trigger. What is the output at the end? It's the lodgement of the project completion package. Which states include review or rework? As you can see, there are 4 review states with 3 states where rework may occur. What's the total lead time? Well, the total lead time was about 2 weeks, although it could be shortened by the project manager if he pushed really hard to get things done sooner. In summary, the lead time for this workflow on average was 2 weeks. The number of steps was 13. The number of review steps was 4, and the number of rework steps was 3. Our objectives for improving this workflow were to reduce the overall lead time by reducing the number of review steps, rework steps, and waiting times, and to, at the same time, maintain high quality. Of course, we also wanted to reduce the number of states that require input from the project manager. Here are the changes that we made to the workflow. First, we added a survey manager role. Then we changed the trigger from the project manager completing the field markup to the survey manager providing the work as constructed survey data. We then removed the first review step as unnecessary. We also removed the second and third review steps for the same reason. Now there is a single review step by the designer, who, by the way, can call a meeting, if necessary, to complete the review. By analyzing this workflow, the customer was able to utilize a better trigger that didn't rely on the project manager, cut the lead time in half, reduce the number of steps to 8, and reduce the number of review and rework steps to 1 each. Most importantly, the number of steps for the PM have been reduced from 6 to 2, freeing up his time to focus on more important things. For anyone who's interested in further reading on this topic, I would recommend these 2 books, which I've used in preparing this presentation. Thanks very much for your time today, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Michael. The recording of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channels in coming days. Keep an eye on our emails and social media for more great upcoming webinar topics. If you need to contact us in the meantime, our details are on the screen now. That concludes our presentation for today. Thank you for attending, and we hope to see you at future webinars.